And we're live. How's everybody doing? Long overdue for a call-in show, so here we are. And things are escalating, so I think we'll have a lot to talk about. Thanks for tuning in. I am going to drop a link in the chat for everybody who wants to talk. Let's drop that in. Yeah, I am wearing eyeliner. That's true. Nope, I'm not gay. That's also true. Not that there's anything wrong with that. In fact, when I reflect on why I occasionally wear eyeliner, it's because I know women find it to be sexy. It's morning where I am right now, but I was at a Burning Man party last night, so sometimes I don't do it myself. I get lady friends to do it. What do y'all think? Right? Adds a little depth to the eyes. That's actually an interesting new stream of content that's so unrelated. Should I do occasional relationship stuff, helping men increase their sexiness and desirability in a way that is not douchey and honest? Because there's a lot of bad advice out there. Like, for example, there's this notion that women like assholes, and there's definitely truth to that, but they don't like assholes because they're assholes. They like them because they possess other qualities that women like confidence and carelessness. But you could have those qualities and be super kind and sweet, right? Okay, well, let me know in the comments if you like this form of content. Maybe we'll do something. Oh yeah, Sugar. Thanks, Nomad, for reminding me. The channel is now named Sugar Star. Welcome to Sugar Star. This was not intentional. I was logged in. I finally figured out what happened, but I've noticed for the past year or so that, and if you're not watching this on YouTube, you're not going to see it, but on YouTube, we're now Sugar Star. For the past year or so, I noticed somebody's been watching children's videos on my account. And I kind of ignored it. It changed my algorithm a little bit. I was seeing all these weird like slime videos and whatever, but I would just like say I'm not interested and put my algorithm back to how I like it. And then the other day I log in and the channel is called Sugar Star. They didn't even spell sugar correctly. And it takes 2 weeks to change back. So welcome to Sugar Star, where everything remains the same. Just name's a little bit more fruity. In 2 weeks, we'll be back to Sulha. It's coming back. It's coming back. And I found out who it was. I went to see which devices I'm logged into, and there was this woman, this Israeli woman who was helping with content a few years ago, and I guess I was logged into her account, and her daughter's just been destroying my algorithm and now changed the name. But hey, it makes for a good story, right? There we go. Anyways, so what's going on the land? Also, viewers, let me know where you're tuning in from. Great to see you all here. This morning, well, I guess this evening, Jerusalem time, Israel destroyed 6 buildings in Beirut. This is said to be Hezbollah's command center, which is a major escalation. Based on what they're reporting, they say they think there's a good chance that Nasrallah has been killed, which would be a major tactical victory for Israel. Also considering they've taken out a lot of their top commanders in the past few months. Obviously, there's still Hezbollah is saying that he's alive. Arab media is reporting he's alive. Israeli media is saying they think he's dead. We will know within hopefully the next few days. Those who watch this channel know that I very rarely support escalation for many reasons. I don't like seeing dead people. Sometimes things escalate in a way that are out of our control, right? Escalation, and I'm not trying to be a fearmonger, but every escalation we see brings us closer to a world war. Do I think the chance of us having a world war in the next few years is high? Probably not too high, but again, when I see escalation, I know however close we are to world war, we get closer. So I almost always support diplomacy and de-escalation. Now, we do want to talk on how this has been going. I mean, on a tactical front, Israel has been has really, really been winning against Hezbollah and Iran to the point where it almost seems like they're paper tigers, or they're just showing immense restraint. Um, but the past, the from Israel killing Hanei, assassinating Hanei in Iran, and Iran not responding, to Israel killing multiple top level commanders of Hezbollah, doing the pager attack, which injured 1,500 Hezbollah soldiers. And there have been responses, right? A rocket was shot on Tel Aviv, rockets were shot on the north, a few soldiers were killed on the northern border. So there has been a response, but compared to what Israel's done, it's been fairly minimal. Um, so I wonder where this restraint's coming from, because it's often said that Hezbollah has 150,000 rockets that they could shoot on Israel, but it's really been a slow trickle. And I'm happy it's been a slow trickle, but my concern is that we're, with each attack, we increase the chance of a full-blown escalation with them, and who knows what that would lead to. Unless they're just not nearly as strong as they've made it seem, or we thought they are. So I'm just not sure. What else is going on? Gaza, obviously, we're still in Gaza. We have a pretty horrific humanitarian crisis going on there. Hezbollah is still alive and well. I mean, I don't want to say well, but they're not near being defeated, despite what many are claiming. And when we look at the cost to innocent life in Gaza relative to what we've gained, I feel like only the most hawkish people will see this as worth it, or just if you just do not care at all about Palestinian civilians. And many Israelis don't. It's very hard to care for those who you're in conflict with, right? Like, who cares about their enemy? That's just Israelis being human. So I generally try to not blame humans for humaning, for acting as all other humans would. So I understand why there's this callous indifference to the well-being of Palestinians on the Israeli side, and vice versa. If 35,000 Israeli civilians were to be killed, Palestinians would not be mourning. Many would be cheering, right? That's natural. We're in conflict with one another. But the humanists amongst us who have the capacity to take a step back and don't give in to this radicalization, we should be very sad with what's going on. 35,000. And I broke this down on a past live stream. There's still some people, and I don't like to be this harsh, but I'm going to use the word despicable. I'm not going to say they're despicable people, but they're acting in a way that's despicable. They're still trying to make it seem like the death toll is highly inflated, and that it's a 1-to-1 civilian to combatant ratio, which there's zero basis for that. Based on all the evidence we could gather, and I maybe I'll break this down while we wait for people to come on, but we can, with a high degree of certainty, say that at least 35,000 Gazan civilians have been killed. In reality, the number might be 2 to 3 times that. What is the ratio? We don't know, but it's certainly not 1-to-1. It's more likely closer to 8-to-1, 9-to-1. If we want to be very charitable, we could say 5-to-1. Now, how do I reach this conclusion? We cannot trust anything Israel or Hamas say. We can't take it at face value unless they provide evidence. The Gaza Ministry of Health sometimes will make a claim without evidence. In that instance, we cannot believe them. But when it comes to the death toll, they have released the names and ID numbers of 34,000 people who have been killed. These people all exist in the Palestinian Population Registry, which is controlled by Israel. Israel can very easily cross-reference this and see if they're fabricating names and ID numbers. And if they're adding people there that aren't dead, Israel can also find just 1 or 2 of these people and say, look, these people are alive. We've arrested them. We have photos of them being alive. The Gaza Ministry of Health is lying. Yet, Israel has not been able to show any proof that the Gaza Ministry of Health is fudging the numbers, because they're not. This doesn't mean there's no inaccuracies, right? When you have a list of 34,000 names, you're going to have some mistakes, but by and large, it's a solid list. This has been their system of reporting for many conflicts, and it's proven to be successful. Now, there's a caveat here, because they have a number of They released the full IDs and names of those who were confirmed, and then they released another number of reported deaths, and that's over 40,000. I'm not even taking that into account because, again, we're not seeing evidence of that. But we have evidence of 34,000 deaths. Now, by the way, can you all hear background noise? Because there's some garden work going on outside, and it's pretty annoying. So let me hold on for 1 second. Okay, much better. I can finally focus. When we look at the 34,000 names, we see that 60% are women, children, and elderly, which means 40% are men. So some would say, okay, well, that's 40% combatants. Not so fast. Because clearly not every man that was killed is a combatant, right? So how do we try to figure out how many of the men who were killed were combatants? Well, let's look at how many women were killed. If we assume, and I think this is safe to assume, let's say the same civilian men and women are dying at a similar rate. If we would assume that, then you're left at 80% of the list being civilians. But we have ample evidence showing us that military-age men are being targeted because they're being confused for Hamas, or just Israeli soldiers are not taking chances. And again, a lot of this comes down to there's two things at play here. One, Hamas will not always wear a uniform. This puts civilians at risk, but soldiers are terrified, right? Being in combat is scary. So they're not taking chances. And the more ethnic hate that exists between two populations, the less chances you're going to take. So shooting a civilian doesn't necessarily need to come from a place of hate. And that is happening as well. There are people just being shot because there's a lot of anger and hate. October 7th pushed a lot of Israelis over the edge. We already were a population that was more radical than ever before. And October 7th just really pushed a lot of people over the edge. So some civilians are being killed just out of hate, but many are just being killed out of fear. They don't want to take chances. So we have a lot of evidence to suggest that military-age men are being targeted. Also, military-age men are much more likely to take risks, like go search for food and water. And we know when you take those risks, you could also be targeted. So I think it's actually fair to conclude that around 90% of the 34,000 names were released are civilians, and perhaps even higher. Now, we also know, and many will say, but you can't say all children are innocent. You could have combatants that are 16 and 17 years old. Well, we haven't actually seen evidence of Hamas using child soldiers in any meaningful way to change the data significantly. But another way to look at it, if we look at how many girls were killed compared to how many boys, you have 1,400 more boys killed than girls. Okay, so maybe those 1,400 boys were combatants, but we also know that 15, 16, 17-year-old boys may be confused for Hamas the same way men are. And we also know that they are more likely to take risks. So this whole idea of child soldiers, it's bullshit. Now, this actually pains me because this pains me as a grandson of a Holocaust survivor. And I know the pain of having our atrocity be denied or people casting doubt on it. People trying to over-intellectualize and minimize the suffering we're seeing. It's done with the Holocaust. It was done with October 7th. And then to see so many people, Jewish people, doing this with Gazan lives, it's sad and it's infuriating. Us Jews, more than anyone, should understand the pain that comes with trying to minimize someone else's suffering. And I get it. Many people have just bought into the propaganda, so they're repeating a trusted source. But you have a lot of these activists who claim they're doing the research and reach these conclusions, and the conclusions they're reaching are not based in reality. And I didn't reach this conclusion that I'm saying because I have access to special information. I actually just looked at it honestly, and this is what the numbers show. So It's unfortunate that we're seeing this. It's unfortunate that we've lost minimum 35,000 Gazan civilians. And the reason I conclude 35,000 minimum is because we know a lot of people are unaccounted for, buried under rubble. Only half the hospitals in Gaza are functional. We don't have a good reporting system. The number might really be double that. And we're not close to defeating Hamas. So yeah. And here's another thing that honestly bothers me, since I'm already on this little rant. And I see we have Mutinous here in chat. We're going to bring you on in a minute, brother. There's a lot of people who are upset with what's happening in Gaza now. Rightfully so. And to say that it's anti-Semitic to be upset about this is also, quite frankly, bullshit and harmful. There's a lot of real anti-Semitism, and it's been blowing up in recent months. The way pro-Israel activists weaponized the term anti-Semitism has diluted its meaning. It's meaningless to many people. No one takes it seriously. So it's much harder to have a real conversation about anti-Semitism. People rightfully can be very upset with the conditions in Gaza, and even with escalation in Lebanon. And this framing, it's like, why won't you let Jews defend themselves? No, shut up. That's just bullshit. It is. There's many ways, there's many forms of defense. Killing 35,000 civilians while Hamas is hiding in tunnels underneath them is not defense in most people's eyes. And if you think it is, fine, let's have a debate about it. But don't say it's anti-Semitic to disagree. Anyways, as y'all can see, I woke up fiery today. I'm going to do a full review either as a live stream or a pre-recorded video. I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash, but I just can't sit silently. I really want to be a moderate voice for peace and bring people together. But as a former IDF soldier, and for somebody who wants to see Israel thrive, I'm going to do a more thorough report on this. I've deeply investigated the war crimes being committed in Gaza, and there's an unprecedented amount of war crimes, more than we've seen in any conflict in recent history. The evidence is pretty damn clear. So I'm going to do a thorough report on that. And honestly, it's coming from a place of love. I really want to see Israel survive and thrive, and I think Israel needs to be transformed in order for that to happen. So we're going to need to have these difficult conversations. So I'm happy to be one to help have these difficult conversations. Whatever backlash comes. I don't care. Anyways, Mutinous, we're bringing you on. How are you, brother? This is your first appearance, right?
That is absolutely correct, Adar. That's my first
Awesome.
appearance.
But we have had you in the comments. We've spoken on Twitter. You even have once donated to the show, so thank you so much. What's on your mind, man?
Well, nothing. It's just what's happening recently. It's quite tragic on every level, and I don't know how that will end. Basically, there is no end in sight. There is no strategic plan for any party. It's just rage and radicalization for all parties, and that's just tragic for everyone.
Yeah, I am with you. You are Jordanian?
I'm Jordanian, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, it's good to have you on. I see we have Jay also wants to join. Jay, either turn your camera on or give yourself a profile pic, and then we'll bring you on. Are you currently in Jordan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the sentiment right now in Jordan about everything going on?
Well, it's tragic as well because there's a lot of sympathy to the Palestinians, and there's a lot of images and videos that is being circulating on social media, and obviously you can understand that people feel rage and anger, and that grows every day. So yeah, it's just tragic, I would say.
Yeah. Are people like upset with the leadership because they're not like vocally pro-Israel, but like they helped shoot down the Iranian drones, and there's like this, call it a soft alliance between Israel and Jordan. Is this something that's causing political tension in Jordan?
Well, I would say Jordan officially said that any interference with Jordan's sovereignty is not to be tolerated, and that's quite a general statement, and that's quite understood by all parties as well, and that's pretty much it. So There are people who are sympathizing with Palestinians and with Hamas, and there are people who are sympathize with Hezbollah and Iran, and there are who are against what Iran is doing and what Hezbollah is doing. So I cannot really get a feel on the exact pulse for everyone because it's just quite divided, basically. But
Right.
what the people feel is that the more Israel commits to its atrocities in Gaza and West Bank and southern part of Lebanon, there is like the tension grows over and over, and it just grows, and that's just not fucking good for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. Basically, just like I
yeah.
admire
Sure.
your courage to be just against the tide and just standing out there and just being vocal, despite of the hate that I would expect that you would get a lot of hate for not being a proper Israeli. I would say I can understand that if that is happening. I don't know if that's happening or not, but I would expect that is the case basically because in every major event, in any event in history, and if you study history, you would notice that the population that is engaged or its country is engaged in a conflict, more and more the population gets more radicalized. It's us against them. It's pretty much tribalism, and that just fuels itself and it grows bigger and bigger to a point where you dehumanize the others or the other party, and you just give yourself all the justification of why you should do what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, the unseen cost of war, the amount of trauma and radicalization we continue to see through this conflict, and again, this some of the reasons why we're seeing such a humanitarian crisis in Gaza is because it's not it's a population that has been radicalized due to conflict. It's the same way we saw something as horrific as October 7th. It's because that's a population that's been radicalized through conflict. Mutinous, I have a question. Is Jordan Palestine?
That's a good question. So let's just start from the beginning, and I'm not sure if my information is correct. It's just what I feel. So Jordan started as Transjordan, which is a biblical term. So the British created all this area based on Sykes-Picot Agreement. I think it's 1916. And throughout history, there was a big civilization in Jordan that vanished, and some experts say it vanished due to lack of water. I think it was in the 8th century. I cannot verify that myself, but for a long time, this was like a big land of deserts, and there was nothing there. So it was a bunch of what's called in English nomads, what Arabs call Bedouins, living in that area. Very much tribal life, and that's pretty much it. What I recall from my grandfather, who lived until the age of 104, and he passed away in 2014, he used to tell me that he used to go to Palestine. It's just part of the land. There was no borders back then and all of that, even after the Ottomans were kicked out of the area. And he never recalled saying anything about Palestinians or Jordanians, just like, it's just Arabs, basically. And then, due to the conflict, basically more refugees came to Jordan, Jordan was basically controlling the 67 border back then, which is the West Bank today. And the second war, I think in 67, basically there was more refugees coming to Jordan. I mean, that's no secret. Like half of Jordanian population are originally Palestinians. They have full rights in Jordan. They have their Jordanian passport, and they are treated as Jordanian, and they are Jordanian. Now, what they feel in their heart is one thing. Some feel that they are like purely Palestinian. Some feel that I'm Palestinian and I am Jordanian. It really differs from one party to another. But back to your question, is Jordan Palestine? I think I think it depends on the question itself and how people respond to that question. I'm not originally Palestinian, so I cannot answer for Palestinians. What I can say is that Palestinians who live in Jordan are under the impression and they feel that they were kicked out of their home and this is just a transitory period.
Hmm.
Whether first, second, or third generation, they feel like it's not, they were kicked out of their home, and they should have the right to go back to their homeland. How will that be, or in what type of form or shape? I don't know. But certainly, Jordan, in my view, is not Palestine. And in my view, there should be a state for the Palestinians and the state for Israelis as well. It's just ridiculous what's happening. Every day, what we're doing right now is just delaying the inevitable. And I see three scenarios here. And I'm just, Adar, if you allow me, I'm just going to be very direct. I choose not to be diplomatic because that's the best way for people to understand. So, scenario number one is that Israel will ethnically cleanse the Palestinians out of the historical land, and that's going to be pretty much it. The downside of that is that, you know what, it doesn't end there. The Muslims or the Arabs controlled Spain, controlled or conquered Spain, or what depends on how you look at it, but they certainly occupied Spain. After 800 years, they were kicked out, basically. So if Israel chooses to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians or kick them out of the land for whatever justification, it's not going to end there. Now, if the Palestinians or the Arabs choose to ethnically cleanse all the Jews out of the historical land, it's not going to end there. There's nowhere to go. Yes, they have dual citizenship, but that's like, it's not the first Zionist generation who came from Europe, basically, wanting to establish a homeland. We're talking about the third or fourth generation right now. Okay? We don't need to talk about the history over and over and over. It's important to learn from history, but we're living in that moment right now. Now, what's happening right now is just an endless violence of conflict that is radicalizing everyone, and it's just like delaying the inevitable, which is either a one-state solution, full equal rights for everyone, or a two-state solution. And yes, that is fucking difficult. Everybody understands that. But what is the alternative? You want to live in an endless conflict? That's not life. Certainly is not life. That's just my
Yeah.
rant.
I'm with you, brother. And I asked you, is Jordan Palestine? I asked it half as a joke because that's often said it's a Hasbara talking point. But I was surprised at how thoughtful of an answer you gave me, and it's what I've heard many times, that I think there's this idea, because the British mandate of Palestine included all of Jordan. Many people, they're like, oh, Palestine used to be all of this, and then 70% was given to the Jordanians, and 30% is what we want, which would be the entire land of Israel, like from the river to the sea. But historic Palestine doesn't have clearly defined borders. But what I've heard over and over again, that west of the Jordan River was seen as a unique piece of land that was not really connected to east of the Jordan River, which was for the most part barren. So it's not like there was this giant land of Palestine and 70% was given to Jordan. The piece of land that we call Israel and Palestinians call Palestine, that's really what's contested. What's east of the river is just barren land that they gave to the Hashemites, and underneath them live many Palestinian refugees. I think that's the best way to look at it. But cool, yeah, good stuff. I know Jake wants to join on. Oh, Jake disappeared. Anyways, let's read some comments. We have some interesting comments. Mutinous, feel free to stay on. I appreciate having you here. Justino is confirming what we're saying, and obviously if you feel differently, you can push back. Jordan population was pretty much empty before 1940, except for some of the cities near the river. That's why the king wanted the West Bank in 48. He needed people in the economy. Interesting. So parts of it were kind of like Palestine, but there were Bedouin tribes that were there, which were not linked to Palestinians west of the river. Even today, 80-90% of the population of Jordan's population lives very close to the border of Palestine. Interesting. Okay. I didn't know that. Did you know that, Munis? Does this
What is that?
That 80 to 90% of Jordan's population lives right on the border.
Right on the border with Israel, you mean?
Yeah, on the border of the West Bank.
Oh, okay. I think Amman, which is the capital, has like 40% of the population, I would say. It's like three cities like consist of like maybe 70% of the
Okay.
population. Yeah, yeah,
Which I
pretty
think is
much.
not uncommon. Have you ever seen the map of Canada? How like 80% live like right on the southern border.
South, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's because of the weather, right? So
Right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. They're trying to warm up, and then we're like, nope, no, you can't come any more south. This is America. But although no one's really securing that border, if we can't secure the southern border where we're actually trying, then the northern border, which is I think the largest land border in the world, or the second largest, you can't stop that. Um, anyways, we have Fahed, our Gazan friend, on. Okay, this is gonna get fun. And Jay, if you can't figure out the avatar, I'll bring you on. I'm not gonna be a dick about it, but I do like a nice aesthetic, so I'd prefer you have an avatar. In the meantime, we'll hear from Fahed, and then if you can't figure it out in 5 minutes, we'll bring you on. Fahed, what's up, brother?
Hello, guys. Can you hear me well?
Yep, loud and clear.
Cool,
You
cool.
are
Thank you.
you're currently in Jordan as well, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay, cool. But tell the chat who you are, what's going on in your life. Give a little
Yeah,
intro.
sure, yeah. So I'm originally from Gaza. I was born and raised in Gaza. I left Gaza a few years ago, basically to work, and I've been between Jordan and Gaza. And I left Gaza 3 weeks before October 7th. So yeah, I dodged a bullet. Yeah, so that's me basically.
You dodged a bullet and a few thousand airstrikes, and I'm grateful that that's the case.
Yeah.
Any reports from friends and family back home? We're seeing a lot on Twitter and stuff, but anything you want to update
Yeah,
us?
yeah. My family, my mother, father, and brothers and sister are safe. They are fine. But I lost like a dozen of relatives and friends. So
Uh,
same as many Gazans.
already a dozen, around a dozen.
Yeah, yeah, more than a dozen, dozens. I said, not dozen.
Wow.
Yeah, like when a bomb drop on a family, the entire family get exterminated. It's not just one person. My aunt actually was killed in her house, but it wasn't a direct hit on her in her house. It was the house next to her, and the rubble poured on her house, and she died under the rubble.
So, Fahad, first of all, I'm very sorry to hear about all these losses. We
Thank you.
often hear that these airstrikes, there must be some Hamas activity in those homes. Can you confirm or deny that there's like are all these airstrikes connected to Hamas activity, or is there just a little bit more of a spray
So
strategy?
you know the news that says 80% of Gaza has turned to rubble,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's what the
So,
numbers show.
yeah, so I have six uncles and one aunt. Okay, and we live across different areas in Gaza. Not a single house is standing, including mine, and none of my family or my relatives are actually connected or related to Hamas. So for my family, 100% we lost our houses.
Right.
I mean, look, what is happening in Gaza right now is like it's insane. Like this so-called Hamas operative label is being attached to anyone and being an excuse to kill his entire family. And the problem is dealing with everyone as if he is Osama bin Laden, Like they don't care. You just kill 20, 30 person for one. And not necessarily mean that one is like a significant member or something. It could be political. It could be anything. I personally, about a few weeks ago, I learned that one of my neighbors was killed. I know him. He's not radical or anything, but he basically joined the police force, which work under the government of Hamas. He was assassinated. I know the guy. He's not radical. He just work in the police force. You know, and like things like that. Another
Right.
another one. Another one. I can say that there's an actor. His name is, and I can send you the full information about this thing. His name is Rashad Abu Skhayle, tamam. He is an actor, played a role in a show similar to Fauda. You know, he basically played the role of a resistant fighter. He's not an actually active member or something. He just played the role of a resistant fighter in a show, and he was targeted in the street, and they killed him and 7 innocent people with him. And I went to the store and tried to look to. I went to his Facebook account, and to my surprise, he was actually criticizing Hamas. He just was a normal person. So you see, that's kind of targets that Israel called like Hamas military and Hamas members. And I can send you the information, his images and his videos of his show, and I will send you everything.
Yeah, Fahad, if you allow me, I would like to ask you like a simple and difficult question at the same time. How do the population in Gaza feel after all the destruction? Are they being more radicalized in the sense of, you know what, I want to fight Israel to the death. I lost everything. I lost my house. I lost my family. Or I want to be subjugated. You know what, I just want an escape from here. Fuck this land. I'm just living away to anywhere. I know it's a difficult question, but I've never interacted with anyone in Gaza. That's what I'm asking you. So appreciate it.
So the answer will be all of these. You know, people respond differently to their environment. So like you will find people who, for example, lost his entire family or lost his brother or 2 brothers. He will vow to revenge. I will understand that. There's people who like did not lose money much. Maybe they lost their home or something. They may be thinking of leaving. There are people thinking of staying. Like it depends on the person eventually. So you cannot give like a standard thing that applies to everyone.
Right. And what about the daily life? Like, you know, it's not like bombing 24/7. Like, is there like, what do people do like during the day? They live in refugee camps, and how's the economy going? Is there like a functioning currency, like the shekel, the Jordan dinar? Is there Bitcoin that's being used? Like, well, what is it like?
Well, it's practically a disaster right now. So before the war, like there was about 50% unemployment rate in Gaza, and now it's over 90%. So basically, everyone who has a job has lost it, and people are fully dependent on aid. There is no jobs, there is no income, there is nothing. People are struggling to secure their daily meals. There's nothing there. It's just a city of rubble and hopelessness.
I want to give Jay the opportunity to come on because he's been in the waiting room for some time. And I also want to address a comment. I see Omri Greenspan here. I've never seen you comment before, so maybe you're new. If you're new, welcome. But you're making a few errors. So first of all, you start by saying, Fahed, you should criticize Hamas for attacking. Well, you barely know Fahed, and you don't know. Hold on, Jay, real quick. You don't know what his views are. So you're just making an assumption about him and his beliefs based on his identity. So something to think about. And then you go, you could live in peace, Fahed. Stop supporting jihad and rapists. But you don't know anything about him, right? So making an assumption about somebody just based on their identity, that's what we call racism, right? And bigotry. And I don't use those words lightly, but this is exactly what you're doing. Now, I always find it interesting when the propaganda that many in the pro-Israel camp say, it's like, oh, you support rapists. Okay, well, we actually have evidence. We have more evidence of the IDF engaging in sexual violence against Palestinians throughout the years than we do vice versa. So, Omri, if you support the IDF, can I say you support rapists? I would actually say that's hyperbolic and not a true statement, because you support the IDF not because there have been IDF soldiers that have engaged in sexual violence. You support them for other reasons, right? So if you yourself aren't going to acknowledge that you support rapists, well, then be a little bit more nuanced and try to understand why.
I tried to put. I tried to fix.
Wait, Jay, real quick.
Yes.
And Omri, you're welcome to come on if you want to have this conversation, but I would get to know people before making judgments and be a little bit more nuanced with how you look at things.
No, yeah, Sorry, I want to put the thing on the, but I don't
Wait,
know why it's not letting me change.
Oh yeah, all good, all good. And then I see somebody named Jukoi on Twitter saying, "What a load of crap." Jukoi, you're welcome on if you want to debate or share your perspective.
We have a question. You said the. No, I get what you're saying, right? I want to.
I wasn't.
I don't know who
Are
this
you?
guy is.
Wait, are you Omri
I
Greenspan?
wanted to say he. You want me to like when you said rape.
Wait, Jay.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you? You're not the same guy as Omri Greenspan, right?
Who's that?
That's who I've just been addressing the past.
I've been
few
on here
minutes.
before. No. I've been here before, but like a
Okay,
while ago. I come on
I
from
think
time to
you
time.
have bad internet connection and there's a lag, so we're kind of talking past each other. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, Jay, the floor is yours. What's up?
What's the conversation about? Like the October 7th, the response.
All of the
What-
above. You can share whatever you want.
Well, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I wouldn't say that like you should just call people rape supporters. Like I don't know who this guy is. He doesn't seem like a radical. He seems like a pretty nice guy. But you said that like the IDF has done more sexual violence than Hamas or something like that
I think there's more there.
in the past.
Look. Sexual violence is very hard to prove. Okay, so I'm not making any conclusive statements, and it's also a very sensitive subject, and sexual violence has
subject.
caused immense pain. A lot of people immense pain. So I don't want to make light of the situation. But if we look at evidence we have available to us, there is more evidence of IDF committing sexual violence towards Palestinians throughout the years. And again, you could say this is because we're in power, we're the ones detaining them. But there has been more instances and more evidence of it than vice versa. I'm not saying that Hamas did not engage in sexual violence. That's not the claim I'm making. But it's interesting how the propaganda machine works. That's not the claim I'm making. I'm pointing to how the propaganda machine works is when you find instances of sexual violence amongst Hamas, and then you're like, oh, you see the rapists, and if you support them, you support rapists. But if you support the IDF, nobody's saying you support. Well, some might. Some say, you support baby killers and rapists. I would say those are two equally hyperbolic statements, and just not the right framing. You have instances of sexual violence from both sides. That's true. But if you take those few instances and attribute that to the organization, then you're just being a propagandist. So I'm just trying to rein that in and allow us to have a more honest conversation. This not support for Hamas, not support for the IDF. Just I want us to be accurate with how we describe things. I want us to be a little bit less hyperbolic so we could have clearer discussions. That's what I'm saying.
No, I misheard you then. My fault.
Oh yeah, all good. Yeah. So what's on your mind? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I guess I'm not on YouTube a lot, so like if I'm like a little, I don't really do this a lot, so if I'm sorry if I'm like a little nervous and stuff. But I guess
all good, man. Anybody coming on, I appreciate the courage. This isn't easy, so take your time.
I was gonna say when it comes, I'm more fluent in like the history, so I guess like the whole idea. I guess I'll continue the thing you were talking about. Jordan is Palestine. Like what the other guy said is accurate. Most of the Jordanians or Palestinians that live there are descendants of the refugees, right? But it's actually interesting because in 1922 is when they broke off, like they drew like the final borders of the mandate, and it is true that Palestine, it was an emirate. Jordan was an emirate within Palestine, right, to give to the Hashemites. And I recently found this out. Like apparently the Jewish Agency for Palestine, which was like the Jewish government, actually voted for the separation of it. Yeah, but yeah, what he said was accurate. I wouldn't call Jordan Palestine because most of the people living there don't see it as Palestine. They see it as like he said, the staging ground to take back historic Palestine.
I mean, I know it's really a Hasbara talking point. I think most of us are on the same page that it's not Palestine. But there's some segment of the population that still like to make that claim. It's to say the entire land from the river to sea is Israel, and if Palestinians want a state, they have Jordan. That's kind of where it's coming from. And then I've heard the reverse say it's like, okay, well, Jews have New York, they have Brooklyn, Anyways, cool. I see we have Justin here. We're gonna bring I always call him Just N, and I keep forgetting it's just a clever way to spell Justin. So Justin, welcome.
Hello,
brother.
everybody. Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I like the subject about the issue of is Jordan Palestine. That's like, I had an interesting discussion with someone about this. So it's when I was saying about the population that lives, I didn't say like they live on the border, but if you look, I sent you a map through WhatsApp. I don't know if you want to share it, but
yeah, we can share it.
If you look at things like from Amman to what's the other city? What's the name of the city in the north? Irbid in the north.
Irbid, yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at the concentration of the population, it's pretty much there. Literally, this is like probably like 20, 30. So Canada, the Canada analogy that you made is very similar. That's where most of the population lives. So for example, there's a city called Assault. Assault kind of comes parallel to Nazareth. I'm sorry, Nablus. So there's a lot of family relations between people who are from Nablus and Assault. Now, if you go toward the south, there's Karak. Karak is actually a city where you find a lot of Hebronites, Khalayla. And Mutinous is nodding, so I think he agrees with me. Because if you look at Jordan before 1948, someone told me the other day, he said, you guys are refugees he's talking about Palestinians. I'm not a Palestinian refugee in Jordan, but he said, you guys are refugees. And I said, no, the king is a refugee because his family was kicked out of Saudi Arabia when the British backed the Saudi family, because the king's family came from where? They came from Hijaz, which is Mecca and Medina. So when the British kicked them out with the help of the Saudi government that they backed up, they had to place these kings somewhere. So one of them was named Abdullah, who's the first king of Jordan. He was placed there. So he, in a sense, was a refugee, not the Palestinians. The Palestinians that are refugees, technically, yes, they're refugees from Palestine, west of the Jordan River, but the monarch was. But there was a presence of about 200,000 Bedouins that did not have any association with Palestinians. So that's the question. So parts of Jordan can technically be Palestine, and even I was going to say real quick, even interesting is even if you see Eretz Israel that the Zionists wanted, they actually included these parts in what they wanted for the state of Israel. If you look at some of the maps.
So Jordan is just the land of the refugees. Mainly.
Yeah, because if you look at the eastern part of Jordan, like 70
land of the refugees.
Yes. Well, in Arabic they say it's blad lil-muhim blad. The Mutinous will say this. So basically a country for those who don't have a country. And if you look, Jordan is now home to the Palestinian refugees, Lebanese refugees, Syrian refugees, Iraqi refugees. Everybody who's been kicked out of their country comes to Jordan. And a lot of Jordanians have resentments. The ones who are, from the Bedouin tribes, some of them have resentment towards some of these people because they feel that their country is pretty much, even though 40% of their population that works for refugee services, which is, it's part economy. And if you look at, for example, the Jordanian airport, Amman airport, 35% of the passengers who fly out of that airport, where do they come from? They come from the West Bank. So West Bank Palestinians that want to travel, they have to go to Jordan. So they benefit from the situation in the West Bank as well.
Wait, so Justin, we're getting some pushback from Slayan saying King Abdullah is a refugee the same way Christopher Columbus was a refugee. What are your thoughts on that?
Christopher Columbus was a refugee.
Well, Protestants were oppressed, right? That was some of the rationale for looking for new land. Okay, I mean, you could be a refugee that then genocides a population.
Well, here's the thing. King Abdullah and his family were supposed to make a deal with the British to be the kings of a unified Arab kingdom.
Super state.
And in the end, the British backed the Saud family. And the Saud family very violently took over Hijaz, which is western part of Saudi Arabia. And then later, they put him and then his brother, they put him in Syria, and they rejected him. And he ended up being king of Iraq. So these kings, they came from Hijaz, the Saudi Peninsula. So I don't know how he can compare that with Christopher Columbus. They weren't explorers. They were implanted there by the British.
What's interesting? Can I say something? What's
Yeah,
interesting?
sure.
What's interesting too is right. Amman under I think it was the late Ottoman, around the late Ottoman period. The Turks also like the first not the first residents, but the biggest population was there. Were the people of the Caucasus. The Turks moved them to the city to like populate it.
Just to be more precise, the Turks did not move them to the cities that were populated. So you're referring to the Circassians, which is originally from the Caucasus region.
Yeah, that's the Caucasus region.
There were almost 100-year war between the Caucasians and the Russians, basically. The Tsar, I think. And as a result, they were kicked out. So some of them went to Syria, some of them went to Jordan and Palestine as well, and some of them went to even a north part of Africa. But these were the early ones who resided in Amman, basically. So that's true.
So Mutinous, real quick, Mutinous, you being Palestinian, does that mean you are descendants of the Bedouins that lived there?
Yeah, I come from one of the tribes. Yeah.
You're okay.
Yeah, I'm Bedouin. Yeah, but you know, so there's two types of Bedouin. Basically, it's not like one type of Bedouin. There is like a nomad type of Bedouin who would move from one area to another seeking food and shelter and water, and there is another kind of Bedouin who would reside in an area and stay in that area. So it's like a Bedouin / peasant or farmer. So
Falachim, right?
Wait, guys, my internet is. Are you guys hearing each other well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Because on my.
No, they're good. They're good.
Probably just me,
I think
then.
the J guy kind of sounds like he's coming in and out, but everybody else is good.
No, I'm seeing a connection unstable on my end. So if you're on my chart, damn, okay.
yeah, I just want to comment on something, if you allow me, Adar, on the refugee part, basically. So King Abdullah did not really come as a refugee just because the British supported the Saud family. It's basically the British. I mean, people don't know this, but if you think about it, the British, this tiny little island controlled most of the world. How could such a small country control the world? So it's basically due to firepower and resources and diplomacy. So I'll focus on the last part. On the diplomatic end, they would exploit relationships within the local population and put minorities in charge of a majority, basically, and they would support the minority. That's pretty much a divide and rule type of mentality that flourished the British Empire, and they were able to exploit a huge amount of wealth from the countries where they operated. And in particular, to King Abdullah, they promised Abdullah a kingdom for Arabs. And that was a huge deal, basically, because you were living under the the Ottoman Empire for like 400 years. I mean, it's a huge bet that you would take that. It's like if you lose, then you and your entire tribe are going to be wiped out, basically. So just for those who don't know about the history here, the British gave promises to the Zionists, to the Arabs, and to the French as well. So pretty much they were in that situation where they promised everyone because they were in war and they just needed a way to win. And pretty much they fulfilled their obligation to the Zionists and to the French, and King Abdullah was left, without much, basically. So his brother was
but again,
Faisal, but Syria is an urban place that's much more civilized. So the local population were like, you know what? Who's this guy? We don't support this guy. No, we don't want that. So basically, sorry, go ahead. You were saying.
I was going to say, but you also have to understand in 1950, King Abdullah was assassinated in Jerusalem by a Palestinian nationalist. And the reason was that there was evidence that when Golda Meir visited King Abdullah before the creation of the state, that there had been an arrangement that the West Bank would be annexed by Jordan. So Jordan was interested in the West Bank. They wanted the economies of Hebron. They wanted the economies of Nablus because, again, they needed that population because the West Bank was a more thriving place at that time. And they fought hard for Jerusalem. They actually because I think Israel went a little farther, trying to take over Jerusalem, that you actually saw. I think the Jordanian army was probably the most effective army in that war, and they actually did maintain Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, as well as other parts of the West Bank. And it was because of that interest. They knew that that territory was going to be vital for their future. I don't want to focus too much on history because I know we're here to talk about the current situation.
I think this was a very interesting conversation about Jordan. I'm happy we had it. I personally learned a lot.
Yeah, but the problem is, Adar, is that we're hearing the rhetoric of people that are saying that Jordan, and that's why I want to go back in the history, that Jordan is Palestine. That, like this guy who's saying Gaza could have been a Singapore. This is the type of haspara that we have to address because Jordan is not Palestine. We know that. Maybe some parts of it are close. And we know that Singapore could not be Singapore if there was a siege, if it had no airport, if it had no seaports, if it had no access to freedom of movement. These kind of statements are ludicrous when people make them. And you have people like Hillary Clinton, Alan Dershowitz, that make these statements. And this guy, Omri, is picking up on them to say that Gaza could have been turned into a Singapore. You can't turn Singapore into a place that has that people can't even move when they want to, free out of access, no seaports. That's impossible.
I agree completely. I would push back on one point, because while the Singapore is not a good analogy because the situations are fundamentally different. Yeah. I do think that Gaza still could have been very different had Hamas decided to use their resources building Gaza and not building tunnels and buying weapons.
I'm going to disagree.
I mean,
I'm going to disagree with you, because if you go back to the 1990s when there was change, if you go back to the flour situation, when the European Union told the people of Gaza that the competitive advantage would be grow flowers that you could export to Europe, get the money and buy foods. Because of these restrictions, flowers ended up going to feeding goats because of this. Tomato, for example, Gaza grows tomatoes. You can't even under.
Can I say something?
This is fine. You're making the claim that a siege affects the economy. There's no debate there.
But it was before Hamas. It was before Hamas.
That's fine. But my point is very simple. When you have tens of billions of dollars that are being spent on war and militarism instead of your population, clearly that makes a difference.
But this happened before Hamas. The money that came in under the Palestinian Authority, the European Union, and things that came, these all were coming before. There was never, even before with the Palestinian Authority, the European Union investment in Gaza was huge. But it wasn't effective because, again, if it takes tomatoes
you can't say it wasn't effective. You can't say it wasn't effective. Because it didn't turn into Singapore, that doesn't mean the dollars didn't actually help the people of Gaza.
Yeah, their wages went up in the 90s.
I need to push back.
Jay, what are you saying? Sorry. Well, Jay and then Fahed. Yeah, Jay. Go ahead.
I said what Adar, what you're saying is accurate, right? Like, yeah, it wasn't like perfect. It wasn't the Singapore of the Middle East, right? But what you're saying is accurate, right? Their wages did go up in the 90s under the Palestinian Authority from the European investment and through the creation of new jobs. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I just want us to snap out of this zero-sum thinking that it's like everything happening in Gaza is 100% the responsibility of Israel, because in my opinion, that just infantilizes Palestinians. And actually the average Gazan, I don't blame, because they're not living in a democracy where they could vote differently and make changes. But to think that Hamas themselves, the leadership, bear zero responsibility for the situation in Gaza, I just don't accept that, because that's not grounded in reality. When you spend tens of billions of dollars building tunnels and not bomb shelters for your people, okay, that's going to have an effect. When you're not using that to build infrastructure, that is going to have an effect. Not to mention, if there wasn't an attempt to continue fighting against Israel, and I understand why the fight continues. I understand why Palestinians have not been able to accept a Jewish state in its current form. I get it. But the siege doesn't exist for no reason. It exists because Hamas has the will to liberate the entire land. So a lot of the situation, as much as Israel has the power, as much as Israel did the siege and this plays an immense role, and as much as Israel literally just destroyed Gaza the past year and should be held accountable for their actions, to say that Hamas doesn't play any role in it, we need to look at the full picture in order to really achieve
But I
solutions.
still think that the main problem is the siege, and even the siege was before 2005. Surely the siege became greater after Hamas, but there's a lot of evidence that before the siege, before Hamas came to power, I mean, for example, like people in Gaza were not able to go live in other parts of Palestine in the West Bank. The traveling through Egypt and stuff, you had to go through Israel. The freedom of movement, freedom of trade and port, all of that was controlled by Israel, even before Hamas.
Justin, we have zero disagreement that Israel plays major responsibility in the situation.
The major,
you put all the blame, right?
Like there, but the major, you can't say that the siege. I mean, if you're saying this, then let's look at the West Bank. The West Bank economy is strangled also by the occupation as well.
No, for sure. But
it is,
and yet it's considerably better than in Gaza. It shows that the decisions of the leaders of the Palestinians have an impact of the lives of Palestinians. I would say the difference between Gaza and the West Bank is the exact proof of what I'm trying to say, that Palestinian leadership has an impact on the lives of their people. There's no reason to make it seem like that's not the case. So we don't have any disagreement about Israel's role. I struggle when we try to make it seem like there's only one thing causing a problem and we're going to ignore the other thing. And the reason I struggle with this, because I just don't view it as like an honest reflection of reality, but it makes it harder for us to reach solutions because we need to pressure all sides. Anybody who has the ability to impact change should be pressured to impact change. So why would I ignore a party that has the ability to impact change? I want immense pressure on anybody who can make a difference. And that's Hamas and Israel. And, you can make the claim, and I would agree with you, that Israel bears greater responsibility because they have more power and they control the borders and the resources. I would agree. But I wouldn't neglect the fact that Hamas plays a major role in the situation.
What basically you said, Adar, I would agree with, right? Like the decisions of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank compared to the Hamas leadership in Gaza plays a different role, right? Like what you said, like instead of going for the armed struggle and using their money to build terror infrastructure and tunnels, they use it to somewhat build their economy. They try to build infrastructure, try to at least build up their medical institutions and stuff. So it just depends on the leadership.
These things exist. Like we have to some level, like I would say good, like, but it's okay. Infrastructure, let's say for us, but the problem that you ignore here, that you always have a military occupation that is not going away. No matter what you want to do, you always have to remember that you have a military occupation. So it's the core of the issue here, not anything else.
That's what I'm saying. Like I'm saying, no matter what kind of blame you want to put on them, you can't. I mean, the overall problem is the siege and the occupation. These are, and I get what Adar is saying, and I think he's coming from a good place. But okay, let's say 85% of the problem is, but to say that it's a decision that this is there to take 50%, I will not say it's 50%. I would refuse that because again.
I don't think it is either, but I don't know quite how to put it in percentages. I just,
And there's a lot of other reasons why the West Bank is different from Gaza. It's not just because of the Palestine. It's actually, to tell you the truth, I'm going to say it's absolutely probably has nothing to do with the West Bank, with the Palestinian Authority. The reason is that the West Bank's economy is much more integrated into Israel traditionally and has been always. And there are benefits because you have the settlements, because you have the roads networks and things like that. So it's not because of the decisions of the Palestinian Authority. Please don't give the Palestinian Authority more credit than they deserve.
No, but I'm sorry, but you have to give them some sort of credit. You can't just like blame Israel and say it's because of Israel.
I wouldn't.
Can I just
okay, then that's your opinion, then.
I want to bring us. We have Slain. Slain has been waiting.
Wait, but I just want to say one more thing too, and then the other guy could go. I'm going to leave soon. But interestingly, also too, if you look in the 70s and the 80s, the Gaza economy was also somewhat integrated with Israel, right? A lot of Gazans used to work in Israel, right? It really was under the Oslo Accords where a lot of this like separation, especially in Gaza, of the economy started to happen. But even then, they were still getting like investments from, like you brought up, from the European Union or the European community.
Just a point here that sorry to cut you here. The idea that they say that these billions came to Gaza and we should do something with it. There's a misrepresentation on what is actually these billions. They are coming in aid in food forms like flour, rice, milk, coming through the United Nations. Like it's not like these money are coming in hard cash and we can buy whatever we want and we can build that economy, but we just choose to not do so. Not like that. Most
Yeah,
of this
100%.
aid is actually coming in food form.
To build a massive underground tunnel network that only militants can use and civilians aren't allowed to access. I mean, clearly that's highly problematic. It takes a lot of resources and a lot of work to build these tunnels, it's used for militants. You know what the civilian death toll in Gaza would be if civilians could go in the tunnels? Think about that. Like, how can we sit here and make it seem like that's okay?
Well, assuming that these places are like designed for humans to stay on them. Like
well, they should be.
First of thing, they are the first target for Israel. They are the first target. You know that. So if Gaza go into tunnel, they are actually in more danger. They will not be safe. These tunnels they are the target.
So can I ask you a question, Adar?
I wait real quick. There's the tunnel network is built primarily in order to fight Israel. It's built for military purposes. The same resources that were used to build that could have been used to build highly safe, highly sophisticated underground bomb shelters for civilians. But the intention is not to protect civilians. It's to be able to fight Israel. Okay, that's a decision. And you could make the argument that that is a good decision. We could have that debate, but that's a decision. So to make it seem like there's no other choice, I struggle to accept that. And I want, Slan, I'm going to bring you on, but I want to go deeper on something. Because the reason it's hard for me to put a percentage of blame is because of this. As an Israeli, I'm more critical of Israel naturally. I tend to look within before looking without. That's just how I think we should be living our life. And I also believe that with great power comes great responsibility. Israel is more powerful. Also, Israel is a democracy, so I think you could expect more of the Israeli people to vote differently. Gazans don't have that privilege. But where do things get challenging? Let's say Israel were to do everything in their power. Okay, they end the siege, right? End the siege. Gaza is entirely free to do whatever they want. That would not cause Hamas to recognize Israel's right to exist. That wouldn't end the armed struggle. Hamas has made it clear that their intention is to free the entire land. So Israel doesn't have much of an incentive to end the siege when that's their intention. So they do all that. What happens? Then there's an attack. Let's say there's an October 7th like attack after Israel ends the siege, and they'll have much better weapons and to fight Israel because there's no siege. How much percent does Israel play in it then?
The problem here that
I'm genuinely interested in how you feel about this.
The problem here that what you put out there is not realistic, because we know that Hamas cannot do that, and eventually Hamas has just agreed to the 67 border and agreed to join the PLO. That's something they did eventually.
No. Are you talking about their charter?
He's talking about the revised charter.
Yeah, but
they changed it.
But Fahed, I reviewed the revised charter on this channel. It is confusing because they say we recognize the establishment of a Palestinian state according to 67 borders. So you're like, 2 states, let's go, baby. But then on multiple occasions they say, and we support continuing to fight Zionism until it is rid from the land. They're not saying kill all the Jews. That's not in their new charter. But they are saying that the struggle does not end with the establishment of a Palestinian state. They're saying their intention is to liberate all of historic Palestine.
Okay, they want to use that as a springboard, basically, like the springboard.
Okay, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is the issue. So the issue is that right now, under a siege, if there's a siege or if there's an occupation, there is a right for people to resist. Now, had Palestine been an independent state, had Palestine had freedom, and Israel knew its borders, they could defend those borders. So, in that example, Gaza's border once it's been settled between what's Palestine and what's Israel, like the West Bank, Gaza, okay, they know where their borders are. They stand and they defend those borders. But the way it is now, you have Israeli troops scattered throughout the West Bank, protecting little amounts of settlers while leaving their borders open for vulnerable to attacks. So, for example, if Palestine was a state and a free state, it could be held accountable for any kind of attacks on an independent state. Okay, but right now you cannot hold Gaza under the same criteria had Jordan attacked or had Lebanon attacked, because those are sovereign countries. Where with Gaza, it is a siege. Therefore, there's this under a siege, countries are allowed to fight back. So your answer is to continue a siege because there might be an attack. Well, should we occupy Jordan because maybe someday Jordan might
no,
attack?
I'm not. No. I'm.
Yeah, I know you're not saying that, but I'm responding to this.
Something quick?
To saying that when Palestine is a sovereign country and a free country, it's and here's another thing. Hamas is not Palestine. Hamas is a part of Palestine. Hold on one second. Okay, so once Palestine is a fully independent state that's integrated into the international system, it has to accept the responsibilities that it cannot plunge at countries and attack them just out of nowhere. So, and there will be a response if we make a treaty and a state is agreed and these are our borders and we violate that, then you have the right to retaliate. But now under a siege and under occupation, you don't have that right.
No, I was going to say this. Wait, real quick. Like, that would be the case if they only went after military targets, but they didn't do that on October 7th, right? They went after civilians. They went into Kibbutz. So it wasn't a legitimate response to occupation or a legitimate response to resistance, right? They broke international law. And if you were watching, for example, the ICJ case in February, the former president said both parties would be, even Hamas, will be judged under the same international law.
That's fine, but hold that criteria. Hold that criteria with Israel.
Wait, no, but you can't make the argument that it was legitimate, though. I'm sorry, it was not a legitimate attack. You attacked civilians.
So it's not a legitimate attack. Can you explain to me what the military objective was for Hamas on October 7th and what actually happened? Because there is a difference with military operations of what a stated objective is and what actually happens. Can you explain to me what Hamas's objective was on October 7th and what actually happened?
You're talking to me or someone else?
No, I'm talking to you, Jay, because I mean, yeah, you're saying that, oh, they went after civilians, they killed civilians,
yeah, they
and
did.
This is also part of the problem that Justin foreshadowed when he said that you guys don't hold the IDF to the same standard.
Well,
so,
I wait.
I don't want you to get to the IDF right now. So I just want to stay on one topic.
just so I understand. You're saying if the stated reason for the attack is different from what actually happened, then that needs to be taken into consideration. You're saying.
I think when it comes to any military operation or supposed military operation, every single country, nation, or armed group is going to state this is what our objective is, whether that is propaganda or whether it is true, whether it is not, right? So then you can look at that on its face and say, okay, this is a terroristic approach, or this is a morally reprehensible approach. Then after you deal with that, then you can deal with what actually happened during that supposed military operation, and whether that it went over the moral line or under the moral line. So that's why I think we should dissect it, because you need to talk about I just feel like it's very important.
I think if we look at things in those terms, then you know both Israel and Hamas had a legitimate cause for what they're doing. Israel is trying to defend itself and to free the hostages. That's their stated goals. Hamas's goals is to get, to get hostages in order to free prisoners. That's their stated goal. Cool. But when we look at the situation on the ground, most people look at it and make an assessment that we have war crimes being committed, that it's unjustifiable, and we shouldn't stand for this. This is true of what we're seeing in Gaza, and this is true with October 7th. I think they're actually quite similar in that regard. And
so you just said, Adar, I'm so sorry. You said the IDF's stated goal for going into Gaza. Jay, or anybody that is Israeli, I need you. What I'm asking you guys, what was Hamas's stated goal? What was Hamas's stated goal for October 7th?
Their stated
Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. What was the goal of Operation Al-Aqsa Flood?
Okay.
Nobody knows.
Well,
No, they said Hamas said what their goal was. So I'm
What
asking you guys if you know, because
what
in
what
order
what
to
I don't
what
get
do they
the
what do
question
they
he's
say
trying
their
to
goal
answer.
was?
That's what I'm trying to confuse. That's why I'm kind of confused. Like he's trying to ask me what I think their goal was, or
you
what
don't have to
actually.
think about it.
No,
They
no, no,
said
no.
what
That's
their
fine.
goal
It's
was.
slain. It's slain. What were their goals? What were their stated goals?
So
Yeah.
Hamas's stated goal was to capture as many the military bases that were outside of the borders of Gaza, to go in, get those like military plans, and to also take as many military hostages as much as possible. If you look at Al Jazeera or TRT reporting on when they even interviewed Hamas members after the operation, you can literally see Hamas soldiers saying, "We were surprised from how easily we were able to go in. We didn't even expect ourselves to be able to go in as much
So what
as
does
we
this have
did."
to do with anything? That's
Yeah,
so
I'm not.
Because
Yeah, I'm not. I don't.
so
Cool.
so
Okay,
That's
because
but
what
to
the
answer your
goal,
question, I think I
massacre
get.
civilians.
wait a
I
second.
understand what he's saying. Listen. If you look at some of the dossiers that the dead Hamas soldiers had on them, there were pamphlets of towns, of roads, and of what the populations wore of these towns and roads. So clearly, their goal, from what it looks like, was to come into Israel, occupy these towns, take hostages, and yes, they did have them also to capture military bases and control military areas. And when it came to the Nova Festival, I don't think that was actually planned. I think they just saw it and they took the
Correct.
opportunity.
They were not even
But
aware of the music festival.
Yeah, but
Okay.
yes,
how's this? I'm not even
So
sure
the
how this
reason
is
why
relevant.
the reason why this is relevant is
okay, no,
because
but Jay, but
Wait, hold on, Jay,
Okay.
let's Lane talk.
so the
Okay.
reason why this is relevant is we have to establish what the stated goal was, what actually happened on that day, and then you do a one-to-one comparison with the IDF. You do a one-to-one comparison with the IDF, and what you end up seeing is that you end up seeing that when you look at the IDF's stated goal and what's going on, number one, they haven't even been able to fulfill their military targets. Number two, if you are going to call Hamas a terrorist organization, let's say you take Hamas as the standard for what a terrorist organization is. You apply that to any nation, most of the superpowers on planet Earth, and their so-called military operations. What you end up finding out is not only are they terrorists, but they're 40 times, 50 times, 100 times more terrorist than the organizations you talk about. So this is why a lot of people that are pro-Palestine, even if they're not necessarily even pro-Hamas, once they hear an Israeli say Hamas is a terrorist organization, but then you see them walking in the street with what's it called, IDF shirts and like Israeli memorabilia, significant like
Okay, what does this have to
reminiscent
do?
of the
Like,
IDF,
can
and
I
you guys
respond to
aren't
something?
even willing to say that the IDF is a terrorist
Can I
organization.
respond?
Nobody can take you
No, Jay, let him
seriously.
finish.
I'm really
Nobody
confused.
can take that seriously.
Jay, let him finish.
Because every single critique that you guys have of Hamas, the rapes, the killings, the beheading of the babies, every single critique that you people have of Hamas as an organization, you can literally apply that to the IDF, multiply it by 10, and it still doesn't equal everything. It still will not equal everything that the IDF has done, yet they will not be considered a terrorist organization. And then what you're left with is
The idea.
the only difference between one group is that one group identifies as Arab and the other group identifies as Jewish.
So, Jay, I'm going to let you speak in a minute, but Slan, I have a question, and I'd like you to just try to respond with a yes or no if possible. So, you consider the IDF to be a terror organization, correct?
Me personally, no. I mean, wait, the IDF I mean, it depends. As a terrorist organization, yes.
Well,
Me
I
personally,
just want to see
yes.
if you're consistent, because I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
Yes.
There's this quote I like that terrorism is the war of the poor, right? Often, if you're considered to be a terrorist, it just has to do with what weapons you're using and how much money you have. I do think that there's a counter that comes down to intentionality, right? So, and again, I think intentionality starts to break down when you get to the difference between killing, let's say, 800 civilians intentionally and then killing 30,000 from callous indifference. I think that there's almost so much like more moral high ground you could take, saying, "Oh, but we didn't intentionally kill them." But I think that there is a nuance there, and many people would say, "Well, terror organizations intentionally target civilians, whereas armies kill them at its collateral damage," right? So I do want to.
I don't think it's collateral damage when you use 2,000-pound bombs and drop them in neighborhoods. You know you're going to intentionally kill. So that argument, So if you don't want to call Israel a terrorist,
Adar didn't finish making his point.
Real quick,
Adar,
I'm going to finish my point. Then it's going to go to Jay, and then Justin, you can speak. This isn't the hill that I'm dying. I'm not making this claim. I'm just I want to present the argument as it is. Many would push back and say a lot of it comes down to intentionality. But I don't think that just because you're not intentionally killing civilians, if you have a callous indifference towards their well-being and you're killing thousands of them, that could be considered worse than intentionally killing a lower number, right? So that's my position. But I want to present the full argument. And many would say intentionality matters. Jay, all you, and then Justin.
No,
can you hear me?
Yeah, like clearly Hamas's stated goal on October 7th was to cause as much chaos as possible, right? Like they even had, like I said, pamphlets and dossiers, like how I mentioned, of like the village, the kibbutzim, the populations, and what their stated goal was, right? Whether if you support Hamas, you think it's justified because they did it because of the blockade or because of the occupation in the West Bank, that's a different argument. But to say that they didn't have a military, what I'm think this guy's trying to get at, they didn't have a military goal, I don't think that's accurate and fair to say. Like at least that's what I'm interpreting of him saying.
No. Slane is saying the military goal wasn't to kill civilians. They just ended up being killed because they saw that,
okay,
it was easier than they thought. But I don't think a stated military goal honestly matters much, because no military is going to, I mean, I don't want to, maybe some terror organizations will, but most even militias and militaries, their stated goal is something that is seen as for the greater good, and something that on its own is not something bad. It's just how it's carried out that is often problematic, and I think that's what we need to look at.
Right, that's the important thing. You hit the nail right on the head. It's important in how it is carried out.
Yeah.
So if you compare how October 7th was carried out to how the IDF carries out their operation in Gaza, the same people, the same crowd that wants to call Hamas a terrorist organization, you necessarily, with that, if you wanted to remain morally consistent, need to apply that same assessment to the IDF. And that same assessment isn't given, which is why people don't take y'all seriously when you say Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Okay,
but even the international community doesn't.
And again,
the international community doesn't. And this is I'm so sorry. I want to get through these talking points really quickly. Is that most of the organized world does not even consider Hamas to be a terrorist organization. And this is why I don't even like necessarily the word terrorist being thrown around as a label, because there are organizations that I would personally consider being a terrorist organization, but on the world stage they're called militaries, right? And also the dynamics is completely different. Hamas is a bunch of people with AK-47s and Kalashnikovs flying in with what's it called? PUBG
gliders.
PUBG style gliders.
But they still did a lot of damage. You can't. I'm sorry. You can't just say.
Okay, but they did. Okay, Jay, they did damage, but did they do this? Do they do the same damage? Because when Israel, listen,
Israel's not actively targeting civilians.
No, but this whole thing about intention, the whole thing about intention, the Israeli.
What are you guys not understanding? They had it.
Okay, but again, we can say
individual
Israel does not carry dossiers on we're just going to go kill as much Palestinians as possible, right?
Brother, have you seen?
It's not the intent in Gaza. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, brother. Jay, the weapons that they're using in Gaza. Okay, 2,000-pound bombs destroy neighborhoods. They don't destroy buildings; they destroy neighborhoods. Secondly, the war in Gaza has not just been a war against Hamas. It has been a war that has destroyed 80% of the fields where food is grown. It's destroyed the water network. It's destroyed hospitals.
Because they're operating in civilian areas.
Esra University. Listen, brother. Esra University. Esra University was.
Adar.
Guys, wait. I muted you both. I don't want to need to talk over anybody. We're not going to be interrupting each other. It makes the stream less enjoyable to watch, and it makes the conversations less productive. Okay? So if anybody's interrupting, they're going
Yeah,
to
but
be
it was,
muted.
I believe it was my turn to speak.
Yeah, Justin, it is your
Yeah.
turn. Jay, please
I actually
don't
got to go
interrupt.
too, but I really appreciate having this conversation with you guys.
Jay,
I
I
have
just
to
want to
go.
let you know one thing before you go, because I haven't been speaking that much, to be honest with you.
Sure, you can talk to
So
me. before I
listen,
leave.
the most important takeaway I think is this, and this is the point that I was trying to get at. If you look at the IDF, the burden of responsibility is much higher, and yet they cause the most collateral damage. And it's not like they don't have the tools to do so. We're talking about a military organization that is top 10 in the entire planet of the Earth. We're talking about an organization that has their intelligence agency rivals that of the CIA. In fact, sometimes the CIA even gets information from the Mossad and the Shin Bet. We're talking about a military that is using artificial intelligence that IDF soldiers are like Hayes Daddy and Lavender, which
They
are
use it
literally
as
AI,
a suggestion, but
and
they
which
say
they
that they
admit
use
on their
it.
own that has a 70% failure rate, and yet they are continuing
No,
to
they're not.
use
So
those.
can I?
Jay,
The 972 magazine.
Jay,
Let me
you're
just
still
make the point.
interrupting.
Plus 972 magazine, an IDF soldier accumulated the testimonies of multiple people that work with those AIs to tell the IDF when to bomb this and when to bomb that. They admitted themselves that it has a 70% plus failure rate, yet these AI tools are still being used to this day on that land. So they are knowingly using a tool that knowingly is being used to kill 70% plus civilians, according to their own metrics, right? When you take into account all of this information and the fact that literally just 2 weeks ago, right? You look at Israeli Sahuni Twitter, and you see people flexing this fact that the IDF was able to carry out the pager attack. This same organization is able to be super precise, and I don't even consider that attack to be precise, but it is as precise as you've gotten since October 7th. They've been able to carry out this attack. They've been able to kill Ismail Haniya in his own in a foreign country that is like 5 countries away and bomb that exact house. Yet how come across their border, less than 5 miles away, they're not able to get that same form of accuracy, that same form of calculated destruction in Gaza? Either it is
Can I
negligence,
answer you now?
or the most powerful either one of the most powerful militaries on planet Earth is run by people that can selectively be idiots whenever they want to, or they're doing it on purpose. Those are the only two possible answers that you
Can I
have to that
answer?
question, and I just don't believe that they're
Before
negligent.
Can I
you
answer?
answer, Adar, before you answer, I'm gonna run. I'm gonna run.
Justin, but Jay also has been. He needs to log off, so we're going to let Jay answer.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. So my I have to actually leave, but thanks for the conversation. But I should say that you cannot underestimate that the civilians, what the weapons that Israel uses, the tactics that Israel uses, the infrastructure that they're destroying, including the Esra University, which was a university that was cleared. Nobody was in it. They knew no militants in it, but they still chose to stay. 70% of the territory of Gaza has been ethnically cleansed.
Justin, I hate doing this. I had to remove you from chat. It was not your turn to speak. You said you're going to go, and then you went on a rant. Jay's been trying to get up. I need to be fair. Jay's been trying to get up for a while. So sorry, brother. I appreciate you coming on, but you can't just hijack the stream like that. Jay, final thoughts, and then
sorry, and Adar, I'm sorry if I kept interrupting. It's just I had two people, like I was trying to answer both of them honestly, right? So the lavender thing in the 972 article, right? You're probably not going to believe the IDF's response to it, which is fine. I'm not going to force you to, but the IDF says that they only use it as a suggestion. At the end of the day, when they're doing precise targeted attacks, they do it by a man. They're not going to do it from a AI program, right? And considering the fact, right, I think you brought something upon the ratios, and I'll leave the source here. It's coming from the Associated Press. They covered it from October to April. The ratios of civilians has steadily gone down from 70% to 38%, and the reason why is because they're using more.
Wait. The what? Wait. You're saying the
civilian to combatant ratio? Is that what you're talking about?
We don't.
No, just the civilian ratio alone.
Jay,
we have two numbers.
Jay,
so the first number is civilian. What is the second?
I have it.
Flame, real quick.
And Jay. This is coming from the Hamas. This is coming from the Palestinian Health Run Ministry, which is pretty accurate.
Right, Jay. I'm asking you a ratio of what to what? What is the ratio of what to what?
We don't have any
just
evidence.
civilians.
We don't have any evidence.
No, I have the article.
Ratio.
Civilians to blank. What is the blank? Civilians to blank.
No,
Civilians to
no, no. I'm
civilians.
talking specifically about civilians. Civilians. So no. This just civilians, right? The civilian ratio has gone down from October to April, and this
Okay.
is coming from the Associated Press. That's what I was trying to get at.
You're
So
saying
it went from
the
70%
amount of
to
civilians that
38%.
have been killed per month is going down. You're saying like there were more killed.
Steadily.
Okay, yeah.
There was more
Okay.
killed in October than in April. Do you get what I'm saying now?
That's true. No. That actually is true, and that's a result of
Okay.
A, diminishing returns on airstrikes, and B, in-person fighting, which is less deadly. That's true. I thought you were making a claim about civilian to combatant ratio, which there's just no. We don't have any.
I'm gonna leave, but I want to leave the source in the chat so anybody can read it. No. That was
Sure. Yeah. Do it. Yeah. Leave the source, and then Jay, thank you so much. You're welcome back next time. Real quick, so Omri Greenspan, civilian to combatant ratio is the best in modern warfare. It absolutely is not. This is just propaganda. It's the civilian to combatant ratio. We can't know. We don't really have any way of knowing, but it's probably around somewhere 8-1, 9-1. You want to be charitable, you could say 7 or 6-1. For people to think that that is normal or okay, it's just not. And who set the standard of what the civilian to combatant ratio should be? The United States, who the only thing they've really set the standard for is what war crimes in urban combat warfare look like. So the fact that the fact that the U.S. with all their war crimes get to set this standard, and Israel's not doing 10-1, which actually they might be doing 10-1, so it's okay. No, if we look at the numbers, okay, we don't know the civilian to combatant ratio. We can't know. But when we look at the amount of civilians that were killed, you have a higher percentage of civilians killed proportionate to population size than you had in Iraq, than you had in Syria, than you have in Russia, Ukraine. Even if we want to look at specific cities like Aleppo, which was widely considered to be a humanitarian disaster, Gaza is more deadly than Aleppo. And the difference is NATO considered invading Syria to topple Assad, while right now the West is supporting Israel in their operation in Gaza. George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, they're widely considered to be war criminals. Okay, so it's not like there's some huge double standard. People don't accept this 10-1 ratio. People don't accept these operations in cities, and Israel is not doing a better job. A minimum, and this is a low estimate, 1.5% of the civilian Gazan population has been killed the past year. That's higher than any of these other conflicts. So this propaganda of we're doing such a good job, no, that's bullshit. You know who's saying it? Propagandists, people like John Spencer who work for West Point, people like Joseph Cohen from the Israel Advocacy Network. These are the people saying it, not actually a objective observers who are actually doing research. And anybody actually doing the research is reaching a very different conclusion. If you want to base your worldview based on propagandists, cool, do it. But that's not gonna give you an accurate worldview.
I think there's a fundamental question here to ask. Do you consider an IDF soldier in his home with his family is a military target and his family is a collateral damage?
I mean, me personally, no, and I would agree the same on the other side. Yeah, but you might find I see what you're getting at. You'll see a double standard. Lightstone, I brought you on, but Fahed. Oh, Lightstone's gone.
Yeah.
So Lightstone's back. So to answer your question, essentially what you're saying is if Hamas is with their family, then they're not a legitimate target. I think most on the pro-Israel side would say you can't attack an IDF soldier in their home if their family is there. But if you ask them the same question about Hamas, they'll be like, sure. I think that's pretty consistent. You'd get that double standard. You might get that double standard in the inverse as well, right? Like people just don't care about their enemy as much as they care about themselves.
I understand that, but I will give you an example. There's a Hamas member. His name is Ihab Hussein. He's a political member. Okay, he works. He works in the government. He's the economy minister. Okay, the first strike on his house, they killed his wife and his sons and daughter. All his family was wiped out. He wasn't even in the house. A few months later, they targeted him sitting in a school. Okay, and they kill also a bunch of civilians with him. That man is not a combatant, and he cannot even pose a threat to himself. to pose a threat to Israel, to be a military target. Does this man consider to be a military target if Hamas, for example, sent 2 suicide bombers into Ben Gvir's house and they bombed his family? Is this okay in any standard, in any logical, human law, moral?
Well, that's a problem because you're looking at it from a moral standpoint, and I think we are all missing the point here. Like when you have invasion, war, there is no morality in all of that. There's no such thing as called like the international law. It's just bullshit. It's just superpowers put some piece of a document and they just want to enforce it on everybody else. So we'd like to think of ourselves as morally in a good standing of historical context of whatever. But I think the fundamental point is there's a group of people, ethnic group of people, who are being under occupation. They are being under siege for whatever reason, and a faction of that people chose to use terror as a weapon of choice. Okay, whether you agree with it or not, that is what Hamas chose here. So, what is the root causes of the problem? And I would like to ask Adar here. So, whenever I travel, I interact with so many people, including Israelis, and I always ask them this question. And I never get really a concrete answer. Maybe a few would give me a concrete answer. But my question was like, and I'm going to ask you, Adar, as what you hear from the Israeli population as well. Not after October 7, because obviously that can radicalize people. But before that, what is the solution to the Palestinian issue? Not you, I mean, what you hear.
Yeah. So most would say the solution is for Palestinians to just accept Israel's right to exist and stop fighting. And as soon as they do that, we'll have peace. That's what you're going to hear from Israelis. You're going to hear that before October 7th, and you're going to hear that after October 7th. That until they accept Israel's right to exist, we won't have peace.
So, Adar, can I maybe add a little bit?
Sure. Is this Lightstone?
Yes.
Yeah, Lightstone. Welcome.
How you doing, guys?
Yeah.
I'll add a little bit, and then I will flip the conversation from a different perspective, which I think we're actually ignoring, the strategic perspective of not of Israel, because we're talking about it all the time, but of Hamas and what is a success or a failure. And for the question, Muteness, I think for many Israelis, ironically, the situation actually entrenched the status quo because Palestinian leadership is refusing to change the status quo. I know what the goals of the Palestinian leadership, if it's Fatah or Hamas or etc. But if you look from the Palestinian perspective, look at the plans that they were planning all those years. The goal was not to change the status quo, with the belief that as you entrench the status quo, Israeli society will get weaker, which, by the way, it's not a bad bet to plan on that. It will get more isolated. It did not work in the past 30 years or 40 years. However, now maybe some people debate, maybe it will. And with the idea that eventually the demographic war will be won, which now I see from my perspective, I see many Palestinians actually stop talking about it. An interesting perspective to mention. And you can say if the Palestinians want to change the status quo, and by the way, I don't think the Palestinians can solve the issue. I think it's also the role for the Israelis to solve the issue. But if the Palestinians want to change the status quo, they actually need to break the status quo, which means to decide things that currently the Palestinian leadership and people are not willing to give up.
Can you explain what you mean by status quo?
Yes, the status quo right now is the Palestinians are, first of all, Israeli occupying the West Bank. This is part of the status quo. Palestinian demands of 67 and the right of return, and not recognizing Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. This is the status quo, and this is why we're stuck in the status quo, because demanding the right of return plus two-state solution plus not recognizing Israel as a Jewish state will keep Israel in the occupation forever. This is Not unless you actually beat militarily. And Hamas saying we can break the status quo with the military. We can actually beat Israel. And now let me flip the conversation here. What was Hamas' goal? To break the status quo. They did not like the status quo. Their strategy until October 7th, and this is what Palestinians forget, but they were very proud about Hamas. By the way, even the Palestinians who did not support Hamas started building deterrence against Israel. Hamas said, we dare you. We dare you attack Gaza. We are defending Gaza, and we'll even defend the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We will defend our brothers in the West Bank. And not only we're doing it defending Gaza, we also have our friends in Lebanon. We have our friends in Iran. We have our friends in Iraq. And then now also Yemen. Hamas did something great, according to many Palestinians. It created deterrence to the Palestinian people. And Israelis, by the way, many Israelis, even right-wing Israelis, were afraid of this deterrence that Hamas built. They were not willing to go into Gaza. 2014 is a good example. But even when they went into Gaza, it was only to the outskirts. They were not willing to have large operations in Gaza. They were even extra careful about the West Bank. But then Hamas said, we don't want deterrence anymore. We want to break the status quo. By the way, this is what they say. We want to change the situation. But by changing the situation, they told to the Israelis, but they don't want deterrence, they want much more than that. And this is when Hamas started losing, by the way. Because their strategy that they built so successfully. By the way, look at the report that was written by a think tank, by the Palestinian think tank in 2014, 16, 18. They praised Hamas about that. They're like, if Hamas continues that, we can actually do something diplomatically, who knows what. But now Israelis are not afraid anymore. They're like, oh, we went to Gaza. Yes, it was bloody. As you said, morality, non-morality, let's put it aside for a moment. But they're like, we are not afraid of Hamas anymore. Now Israel is not afraid of Hezbollah anymore. Where's the deterrence of the Arab world? Where's the deterrence of the Palestinians? It just got destroyed because of October 7th. It was, and because of this, by the way, Israelis will be more paranoid. Palestinians will be more paranoid because now we don't have any deterrence. And that status quo will get entrenched in the West Bank, not the opposite. And I think this is the strategic failure of Hamas, not the success. The strategic, maybe also Israel, sometimes both sides can fail. But Hamas actually entrenched the status quo by giving up their deterrence. And I think this is the issue, but very few people are talking about.
Yeah, I mean, Lightstone, I definitely appreciate that perspective because I actually haven't heard that framing before, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. It's certainly not it's not a perspective that inspires much hope, but I think you're making a salient point. So thanks for sharing that. I'm interested what others on the panel think.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly,
go on.
I can understand the perspective that you're coming from, but I think one thing that you said that was very dangerous was that that the Palestinians are entrenched in a status quo, and it seemed to me like earlier you were talking about how Palestinians just keep wanting more and more and more and more. This is a dangerous talking point that is brought up by a lot of Israelis because it is almost as if it is spoken from the position of that Israel had a right to exist when it was created, and it just existed from it just came out of thin air. You know, there wasn't any Palestinians that were there before, that were living there before. Israelis, this just happened to be, Israelis just like it just came into existence, and then Palestinians are just asking for it, not back, but they're asking for it. It's not like they're asking for it back, and it's not. We're cognizant of history whatsoever. With that being said, though, I do think that a lot of people are being entrenched into their status quos. But you have to put that responsibility though onto the people that are in power. And when you talk about that militarily, it's the IDF. When you talk about it politically, that is Israel. Maybe you can make a case that nowadays Palestine and Palestinians are getting more political power on the world stage, but it is still nothing compared to Israel, because at the end of the day, political power is established through policy, not through even the majority liking one particular policy over another. So when you look at political policy, when you look at military might, when you look at basically everything except maybe culture, Israel has the power in most of these cases, and if anything, they have control over the status quo. When you talk about the political parties that are in power on the Palestinian side, obviously you have Fatah / the Palestinian Authority, and you have Hamas. When you look at the alternative to Hamas, it is an organization that sells itself out, whores itself out to the Israeli government. It is an organization that only unleashes its police force on Palestinians and not on Israeli settlers that take over land, that kick people off of their own land, in land that Israel agrees internationally is not even theirs. The West Bank is considered to be a occupied territory by Israel, the same way Puerto Rico is, the same way Puerto Rico is in the case of the United States, and yet they are still subsidizing and allowing Israelis to live on that land. And we as Palestinians, even people that don't necessarily support Hamas per se, and this is something you got right, see what Hamas is doing as they are the only other that is directly responding to the injustices that are being put onto them. And to that, I think the more productive conversation that we need to have is we need to understand what are the problems of the Palestinian people and what are the problems of the Israeli people, and then what is a solution that is going to solve both of these issues. And I think that Palestinians have a lot of learning to do in terms of what are really the problems that Israelis really have. And Israelis have the responsibility of figuring out what are the problems that Palestinians have. And a lot of you Israelis don't understand the problems that Palestinians have. You're saying that we want more of the land.
No, I did not say that. Let me correct myself, because you said that already twice. I did not say that.
It seems like Lightstone. Wait, real quick, just real quick. It seems like Lightstone was actually just giving an analysis of the result of October 7th. He's not even making a moral judgment on any of it. He's not. It was simply an analysis of what can be a result of October 7th, and he thinks it's going to.
So can I clarify, because I heard it mentioned twice.
I need to run to the bathroom, but you guys got it.
Okay, so Stein, I apologize, but I do want to clarify. I don't think that I will clarify. It's not about Palestinians want more land. I did not say that. The current situation, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is what the PLO stated. The PLO already did the Great Compromise, as they stated, and right now the minimum and the maximum that they're demanding is the 1967 line. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. I did not say they need more land or less. They will say no for less land. However, I did not say they want more land. I'm not sure where you heard me saying they want more land. I apologize if I did, but I'm not sure that I said that. And if I did, I did not mean that. The status quo right now that the PLO for many years, already quarter of the century at least, is right of return, 67 borders, and also like few details that we can mention, but not recognizing Israel as the Jewish nation state of the Jewish people.
I mean, there
are additional details, but I'm not arguing that they want more land.
So look, can I, Lightstone? I think okay, because you brought up all this stuff as a matter of fact and not necessarily what you believe, and that's fine. I could appreciate that analysis, but I guess what I want to ask you is, and I'll answer it if you want me to, is I want you to list for me what demands do Israelis want, because you seem to know, and I want you to explain to me what demands do you think Palestinians want. So explain to me the demands of both people, and just what are the demands of both sides?
It's a guys,
we're closing in on the 2-hour mark, so I do want to start wrapping it up. So Lightstone, feel free to ask that question. Then we're going to get into some final thoughts, and then we're going to wrap it up. And we could always. get you all back for another one. This was awesome.
Yeah, it is a complicated question because there's no one demand, unfortunately, from each group. However, I do think there is a supermajority from the Israeli side that will compromise on a 2 states for 2 people. Okay, and I think within the spirit of the Olmert plan. However, within the spirit of the Olmert plan, let me remind that only a symbolic right of return, but is still far away from what a Palestinian mainstream, as far as I know.
Can you spell that? Olmert plan? What is that?
Olmert. That's Ehud Olmert.
The 2008 plan.
Okay.
Proposal, but never got pushed. Many stories why yes, why no. I'm not putting blame on anyone. However, for many Israelis, there are doubts, and if they're justified or not justified is a different question, but there are doubts that the Palestinians will ever agree with this plan to finish the struggle. And I think from Palestinians, by the way, the right of return is a keystone struggle, but I'm not sure, but maybe very few people are willing to compromise on. And if it's compromising, it's not enough to compromise from Israeli perspective. And I think it's a key issue. I honestly, yes, it's 67 and it can be adjusted. I think both sides can actually find the correct adjustment. However, the right of return is a key issue. And Jerusalem can, I think even Jerusalem can be solved. I'm not sure if this is the key issue. I think it's the right of return, which is the key issue for both sides, as far as from what I'm seeing.
So this is what I personally believe that it is.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 2 different peoples with 2 different I don't even like to say 2 different histories. I like to say intersectioning histories that have separated. So you have the Jewish people, an ethno-religion, and those people are, Ashkenazis, Mizrahi, whatever it is, who have a claim from 3,000 years ago that they've had history on that land, and you've had 2 to 3 different expulsions, whatever it may be, and they have no other. When I say no other place to go, I say no other place to go politically, a place that they can call truly 100% theirs, right? And they would like to have a home in that case, and that's what we hear all the time about, like, oh, there's only one Jewish state, there's only one Jewish state, there's only one Jewish state. Those people would like to have a land to live by their laws, that they have a historical affinity to, and they want the right to basically raise their families there, and anybody that identifies with that ethno-religion to be able to go over there. When you look at the Palestinian history, Palestinians identify themselves as Palestinian first before they identify themselves as Arab, and this is something that Palestinians get wrong themselves, and a lot of people that talk about Palestinian history that do. For example, putting King Abdullah in the same circle on a Venn diagram as Palestinian Arabs they're not the same people. There's Levantine Arabs, there's North African Arabs, there's Arabs from the Arabian Peninsula. Palestinians, their lineage goes all the way back to arguably the time of 3,000 years ago, the same Jews, because they were Jews, that they were pagans that converted to Judaism, that converted to Christianity, that converted to Islam, that genetically share the same genetics as a lot of Jews that are Mizrahi, Ashkenazi, whatever it may be. And those people have been on that land, and they've been in those various villages. And then one day a people came and said that they didn't say that, not only did they say that they wanted to return home, but that for their state to be created, they had to become a majority. And that for them to be a majority, they had to get rid of the existing majority at that time, which were the Palestinian people. And those Palestinian people were kicked out to those different lands, whether it is Syria, whether it is Lebanon, whether it is Jordan, whether it is all of those places. And then those borders were cut. And those people today are people that either, if they live inside or outside of Palestine, don't have the same rights that Israelis do, don't have the same rights when it comes to economy, don't have the same rights when it comes to just simply being able to go from place to place. I have family members that a trip that a settler can take for 15 minutes is 3 hours for them simply because of checkpoints. And so that state is creation, a state that is created on that basis of the prioritization of one people that doesn't even necessarily have a monopoly on the indigenousness of that land, right? That in and of itself is an issue. So, and a lot of people think this is the first time that they're even hearing about this history.
Yeah.
And so the way that we solve the problem to begin with is we need to identify what that problem is. And then when you identify basically the strifes of both people, only then and then is when you can come to a solution. And that only comes when, you know, Palestinians don't start calling Jews foreigners and Jews stop calling Palestinians foreigners. Because I run into this issue so much.
I
just want to finish my point real quick, to where people are told, you talk to Israelis and it's like they're talking about history from a completely different planet, from a completely different timeline. History cannot be debated on. It is something that happened. We have to first, everybody has to be educated on what happened, and then you want to come up with a solution, you come up with a solution from there, from then on. Both peoples have history on that land. And when the issue is that when the Zionist state was created, it didn't recognize that one group had history on that land. And I think that's one of that is honestly the first step to a solution, is both peoples recognizing that both peoples have history. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the
I have a few technical
Lightstone. This will be your final thoughts. So obviously feel free to respond, but keep in mind these are your final thoughts.
Because I have few technical disagreements, it doesn't mean I cannot talk about what we do agree.
Yeah, so I actually have a suggestion. I'm
talking about what we do agree, not about what we don't agree. So,
well, I'll make a suggestion when you're done. Go ahead.
Okay. I did say a month ago that the only way to start even trying to solve the conflict is when Palestinians will understand that the Jews are as Palestinians, and when the Israelis will understand that the Palestinians are as Zionists as they are Zionists. In the end of the day, I do agree with what you're trying to express here, and maybe I don't think it's part of the solution. I think it's part of even trying to imagine a solution. And this is forcing us to, I think, to be in a consensus to put an ethnic-based conflict framework and not a colonial settler framework. Because the moment it's a colonial settler framework, nothing makes any sense in this conflict. The moment you understand it's an ethnic-based framework, we see the only solution is to create, and I'm a big proponent for it, a two-state solution for two people. And by the way, it does not need to reject future cooperation between those two states. But I think with the spirit of what you said, I do agree with you. Palestinians are as Zionists as Israelis, and Israelis are as Palestinians as Palestinians. So with that, we do have a lot of agreement here.
Thanks so much, Lightstone. Slain, you don't need to respond, obviously, if you don't want to, but are you Palestinian? Slain? Can you hear me? Maybe he left for a minute because
no, I'm still here. I'm still here. My bad. My mic was
Slain, weird. So obviously you don't need to answer if you don't want to, but are you Palestinian?
Oh yeah.
You are? Okay. I just don't have. I don't know if we've ever spoken before, but cool.
My family was from Hebron.
But Lightstone, you're Israeli, right?
Yeah.
But well, Shomim. Okay.
My family is one of those families that got ethnically cleansed in 29.
Interesting.
Yeah. So.
Interestingly, my family too. So we should talk about that at some point. But I want to invite you both on to have a one-on-one conversation because I think this is going very well. It's just we're 2 hours in, but I don't have either of your contact information, so I'm going to put in the private chat my email and my Instagram. And if you guys have interest in doing this, let's schedule a conversation between the two of you.
I think we're both already in the Sulha Discord.
You are? Okay. So you know each other? Well, so you can message me on Discord as well, but I would like to set this up if you two are interested, because I think I think this is an awesome conversation. So I would like to continue it. Fahed, brother, I know you've been trying to tune in, and there's just been a lot going on, but I'd love to hear your final thoughts before we wrap it up.
Sure, no problem. So I think we spoke before, and you know my opinion, and I see in the chat that there's this perception like they always point their fingers at Hamas. Look, I personally do not agree with Hamas politically at all. I don't think October 7 was a good move. It was a disaster. That's
Whoa,
my
whoa, Omri
position.
Greenspan. Omri Greenspan, do you hear that?
Well,
Omri, do you hear that? Oh my God. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, but the problem is I cannot just point my finger at Hamas and single it out. The problem is like inside the Palestinian community, they are viciously criticizing Hamas more than you think. But the problem is that these opinions are being weaponized and used against us as like, see, they don't like Hamas. It's fine to bomb them and kill their children. And that's what I don't want to happen. I don't like that. I cannot point my finger at Hamas without before pointing my finger at the military occupation that did not stop. The constant thing that did not change is the military occupation. Hamas came 20 years after the military occupation, and they got strength 15 years later, and then they have some kind of military threat. So that's my position. I don't agree with them, but I just cannot leave them alone, you know? And let it be my final point. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Fahed. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts. We definitely need more voices like yours here. So thank you so much. Shukran. Muteness. Final thoughts, brother.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about what happens in the region. Like if you recall World War One, most countries enter that war thinking it's gonna just be a picnic of 4 weeks and that's pretty much it, and nobody knew that's gonna be a great war. So I feel that we're like in the region, we're like living in the like what Europe was during the Dark Ages. I hope it doesn't really turn ugly. I'm hopeful that out of this misery for everyone, that both parties, but necessarily the Israelis, would think about, you know what, there's a cause of the occupation, and pretty much maybe after the fog of war, we need to ask a difficult question and what is the solution rather than managing the conflict here. And I hope for the Palestinians as well, like, you know, if they see goodwill out of the Israelis here, and they can think of, you know, let's not just use only violence here as the only way to get occupation. And I know there has been setbacks in the past, but there can be a way. And thank you so much, Adar, for being against the tide and standing on supporting your own arguments against the tide. So I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you, brother. Much appreciated. Thank you all. This was great. We will be back next week for another stream. I'm not sure exactly what it will be, but it will be something good. So thank you all for tuning in. If you're new here, please subscribe. Our goal is simple: bring people together for respectful dialogue around contentious issues, primarily Israel Palestine, but we do touch on other topics at times. Any and all support is appreciated. So thank you all. Until next time.